Of all the things I've seen on the battlefields of the frontier, the pilot is the true dominant force. Fast and agile. Graceful, yet devastating. Perceptive. Resourceful. And relentless. The pilot sees the world differently. Sheer walls become flanking routes. Pilots fight differently. Experienced in deception and maneuver, even overwhelming odds shift in their favor. But what truly separates the pilot from all the grunting machines of the battlefield is the bond between a pilot and a Titan. To a Titan, a pilot can only be stopped by overwhelming force, or an equal.
Pilots are professional killers, long numb to the horrors of death and battle through countless hours of experience. They are primarily motivated by their own personal goals and ambitions and consider only other pilots, often of the same faction or group, to be their equals. The ruthless nature of battle in the 28th century and the intensive pilot training that leaves less than 2% of aspirants to become ever combat certified has ultimately instilled a hyper-competitive culture between pilots, creating far more rivals than friends, and creating situations in which pilots lose sight of any overarching goals to pursue personal vendettas against other pilots. From what I could find, this happened often. However, in a dystopian future where human life is expendable and corporate misunderstandings are resolved on the battlefield by ruthless mercenaries, pilots are the true dominant force. Possessing superior skills, equipment, and experience, pilots are on a whole other level compared to standard infantry. Legendary pilots like Captain Lastimosa and Cuban Bliss can shift the outcome of entire battles through their singular presence alone, and they are as feared as they are renowned throughout the entire Titanfall universe. To properly understand and apply the basic philosophy and mindset of these elite future soldiers, first we must understand their background so that we can see just why they act and think the way they do. We'll be using IMC pilots as the baseline here, since the IMC are the original creators of the Titan chassis that gave pilots their namesake. Less than 2% of all aspiring IMC pilots survive the full course of training to become a basic combat certified pilot. Becoming augmented as a pilot is not required prerequisite to become combat certified, like it would be for Spartans in Halo, as much as their skill, equipment, and experience make it appear so to the average foot soldier. Instead, pilots are the best of the best who constantly train in between real-time battles using simpods, with veteran pilots potentially having thousands of battles worth of simulated and real combat experience through their multiple regenerations, giving them extended lifetimes and enhanced learning capabilities. Valued pilots rightly have little fear of death, as upon expiration, their consciousness can be digitized and restored into a robot body called a simulacrum. Whether this is truly them or just a copy of them is a subject I won't be touching on with this video, but it's noteworthy to mention that some transhumanist pilots actually voluntarily transfer their consciousness into simulacrums to further improve their own combat prowess. This combination of knowledgeably being the best of the best the Titanfall universe has to offer, with hundreds of thousands of hours of combat simulation training spent endlessly fighting, killing, and dying in war games over and over again, has notable results on the pilot's psyche. Pilots, on a whole, are arrogant, callous, and many are irreverent to the actual outcomes of the wars they're actively participating in, concerned instead with their own personal ambitions and gripes on the battlefield. With the line between virtual skirmishes and real battles so blurred beyond recognition, some pilots display outright sociopathic tendencies both on and off the field and have virtually no regard for human life. I did say this was a dystopian future. Don't get me wrong, pilots are all still badass super soldiers without question, but just like how the Spartan program in Halo involved the abduction, body doubling, and deadly augmentation of children to become Spartans, and it turned out old Mama Halsey was a bad egg, there are insidious reasons behind the amazing feats of pilots in the Titanfall universe. While pilot is technically a catch-all term for anyone who pilots and is therefore neurologically linked to a Titan, be they civilian or military, combat-certified pilots of the various factions are what we'll be referring to going forward. What is known, however, is that through this link, the pilot's consciousness essentially merges with the Titan chassis, so that the chassis is controlled like that of your own body. Though the Titans you control in multiplayer have simple AI that you summon forth with each Titanfall, hence the welcome back pilot quote upon embarking. Advanced AI like BT may merge with your consciousness entirely during a Titan link, allowing you to become one with your Titan and maximize your potential. Pretty cool stuff. So now that we understand some of the backstory behind pilots in the Titanfall universe, what are the core tenets of being a pilot on the battlefield? What do they think about, and why? Cooper himself actually breaks down what it means to be a pilot quite succinctly during the single-player trailer, and using his words, along with Captain Lastimosa's during the opening tutorial, plus in-game tooltips and lore, a pilot compendium can be created. Pilots are a dominant force, fast and agile, graceful yet devastating, perceptive, resourceful, relentless, have a unique perspective, unique maneuvers, a unique fighting style, and are linked to a Titan. Any pilot who has achieved in-game proficiency in each of these areas has become an experienced pilot. Just as a little aside here on my own experience, I recently moved past Gen 20 myself and have won about 70% of all my matches I've ever played and was the MVP more often than not. Also, I've seen Attack on Titan dubbed. With that out of the way, many battles of attrition often come down to superior troop presence and logistics. Pilots do away with that by being such a powerful force that they must be contended with one way or another before any one side can secure victory. This can be either through overwhelming force or bringing your own pilots of equal skill to rival them. Either way, a pilot should never be irrelevant and often bears the weight of entire battles on their agile shoulders. This can be seen in-game by a single pilot, often G100, being able to dominate an entire match of attrition by themselves. This happens when there is no equal pilot to oppose them on foot, or especially when linked with a Titan, and they use their superior movement and combat prowess to dominate the entire match unopposed. With the skill ceiling, you can absolutely go off as a pilot in Titanfall 2, and are restrained only by your own skill and ability in terms of what you can pull off and how often. It's an unfortunate misnomer to think a pilot must always keep moving. When they do move, however, a pilot's moves must be quick and precise. Any pilot, after a few hours in the gauntlet, can learn to be reasonably quick, but the addition of precision implies a far greater purpose than just fast movement alone. Landing where you intend for the optimal flanking route angle, or to jump off once more into a whole new set of movement combinations, is just as important as moving as quickly as you can, with experienced pilots effortlessly flowing through the battlefield like water. Endgame, this means building up as much speed as you can in order to cover ground as quickly as possible and make yourself a difficult target for enemy pilots. You shouldn't go so fast that you cannot aim or navigate the map properly, though this balance comes with experience. Unlike most shooters, in Titanfall 2, good movement is just as rewarded as good aim, and many experienced pilots actually focus more on perfecting their movement before beginning to move on to honing their aim. The floaty, free-form nature of experienced pilot movements isn't for show. It's the best way to move around the battlefield without being too predictable, and allows devastation through constant pressure and outflanking other pilots by striking from above, behind, or in any unexpected angle they wouldn't have expected you to come from. In-game, experienced pilots can be seen interweaving combat with their movement patterns and dispatching other pilots without even breaking their stride. A valued pilot need only see the briefest snapshot of an image to intuitively formulate the best course of action, given to their thousands of hours of experience. Pilots also continuously observe the flow of battle and adjust their actions based upon this constant feedback. In addition, experience has taught pilots to see but target priorities where others would see pure chaos. The benefit of maximizing your awareness on the battlefield cannot be overstated. In-game, you are almost always provided enough information to make a rational decision. How many Titans are on the field or standing by to deploy? What general direction will the enemy be spawning from? And how close is your Titan Core to being ready? All this information is instantaneously accessible on your HUD and can be used to influence your own tactical decisions and help better coordinate with your team, particularly once the Titans fall. Meanwhile, the telltale sound of pilot jump pads, the kind of pilot or Titan you're fighting, what weapon sounds you hear and from where. A perceptive pilot can use all given information to formulate their next course of action. A true pilot is never a one-trick pony, or has a main tool or weapon they cannot go without. They instead adapt to whatever situation they find themselves in on the fly. No weapon, gadget, or fighting style is out of reach, and a pilot will use every resource at their disposal to eliminate any hostiles and accomplish the mission. In-game, an experienced pilot can effectively use any tactical or weapon combination and is not dependent on any specific weapon, playstyle, or Titan. In combat, things never go as you expect, and being able to make it work with whatever kit you have is crucial to overcoming other pilots on the frontier. No action is taken without follow-through. Opportunities and weaknesses need to be seized upon and exploited to their maximum effect whenever possible, as these crucial moments often shape the entire battle to come. Pilots do not hesitate, and their killer instinct and drive is rivaled only perhaps by their own machines of death on the battlefield. In-game, this means always securing the kill. Pilots don't flee, only momentarily retreat. and so letting one get away, only to see them execute you from behind, may haunt you for the rest of your Titanfall 2 career. There is but a line between being relentless and reckless, but the focus should always be on maximizing the lethality, not the survivability, of your playstyle. If you never died the entire match, but also only secured 2 to 3 kills, you've really only mastered the art of being a non-factor. Pilots have a familiarity with death, combat, and maneuver unrivaled on the field of battle. The countless hours spent training with their weapons, gadgets, and equipment allow them to see routes and opportunities standard infantry would never know exist, and highly experienced pilots see these very same possibilities in areas even other pilots wouldn't know exist. In game, you eventually develop your own form of runner's vision, where you see potential parkour routes before you for you to take. With more and more experience, this list expands and becomes so familiar, you see them even in combat and can pull off some unexpected and most importantly badass moves. Pilots can reposition, outflank, close the gap, and traverse the battlefield in such a unique way thanks to their jump kits and training. At its essence, parkour is simply about moving from point A to point B as quickly and as efficiently as possible. Pilot maneuvering isn't quite like parkour, but it's similar. As the gauntlet would suggest, pilots incorporate slaying bodies into this movement, and so it is modified for combat effectiveness. After all, maximum efficiency and movement isn't of much value if you die before ever reaching your destination. In game, these unique maneuvers are slide hopping, wall running, and grappling. Even Respawn's other games, like Apex Legends, don't offer as much mobility as your pilot kit gives you in Titanfall 2. Unlike most in the Super Soldier archetype, pilots rely on advanced mobility and deception to outflank and dispatch their opponents, rather than engaging with the enemy directly. Pilots move through the battlefield like wraiths, seemingly everywhere at once as their fluidity makes them virtually impossible to pin down. Even pilots kitted for long-range combat continuously reposition themselves into new advantageous positions. In-game, most experienced pilots fall into 2 main categories when actively trying to win as hard as possible. Relatively close quarters playstyles with SMGs and a movement assist tactical, be it in the form of stun or grapple, or long-range playstyles using defensive tacticals like cloak or phase shift. The former group relies on quickly closing any distances to get into effective SMG range, whereas the latter group relies on lines of sight to see the enemy pilots coming before they get in range. These 2 categories of pilots do not like each other particularly well. What truly distinguishes pilots from one another is not their skill on the ground, but their skill in a Titan. A single pilot linked with her Titan can sway the outcome of an entire battle, even with other pilots on the field. The only thing stopping this is an equal or the combined overwhelming efforts of the enemy pilots. An experienced pilot's prowess directly translates into whatever Titan they've linked with, making them force multipliers that can take on multiple enemy Titans at once, even in circumstances where they'd be overwhelmed in straight pilot-on-pilot combat. In attrition, whichever faction holds the most amount of Titans for the longest amount of time usually prevails. Even if a team loses most of their pilot-on-pilot engagements, so long as they win Titan-on-Titan and provide anti-Titan support while on the ground, they can still come out ahead in points as they spend more time controlling the field with their Titans and get their pilot kills this way instead. Working together and positioning during Titanfall phase of attrition is essential, as teamwork plays its largest role in Titan combat. There is naturally a large overlap between how pilots behave in lore and how pilots behave in the Titanfall 2 community. The toxicity, the arrogance, the disregard for the experiences of others, and a disdain for new players are all perfectly in line with pilot culture. Few other games allow a single player to have so much influence over an entire lobby to the extent that Titanfall 2 does, and it's where some of the best go to hone their skills in its merciless forge. The best way to deal with toxic players in Titanfall 2 is the same tried and true method one can apply in every multiplayer game: relentlessly slapping those cheeks. Instilled with the knowledge of how pilots think and act, both in-game and in lore, you can now properly appreciate when the Gen 100 pilot 360 no-scope crabbers you in midair before phase embarking into his golden ion that just crushed that Titan you were running to, only to then laser core an unsuspecting Gen 2 tone just trying to survive more than 30 seconds. I know I sure appreciate when it happens to me. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe, let me know what you think, and this is Void Hunt, signing out.